Ladies and gentlemen, Sony are working on a PlayStation Portable, albeit with some differences perhaps to what many of us hoped for. We're going to be discussing the rumours along with some of my own information and conducting an analysis of sorts and figuring out what exactly Sony could be planning in the future. There's a lot of stuff to go through here and I'm hoping you'll join me in the conversation down below. And we're going to get into all of this after this message from the video sponsor.
If you're running a copy of Windows 10 which isn't activated, of course, not only do you have to worry about the missing customization options, but there's also that annoying Windows desktop watermark reminding you to activate. Today's video is sponsored by WhoKeys.com, and they've an excellent price on Windows 10 Professional as well as Home keys. Yeah, and they also of course sell games. I've bought a few Windows 10 keys with my own personal account to test everything was legit and worked in preparation for this sponsored video. You can pick up one of their keys for 25% off using the coupon code RGT in the checkout. There's links to their website in the video description. Also, if you're building a few systems, there's bundles available too. Again, you can check out WhoKeys.com and use the coupon code RGT for 25% off the listed Windows 10 key prices.
So reports that Sony are working on a handheld and speculation that Sony are working on a handheld are not new. I myself, over a year ago, leaked that, well, my own sources were telling me just that. But over the past few days, Tom Henderson, who's been pretty well known in the Sony insider circles, had been hinting that there was a new console or piece of hardware in the works. Not to mention, Jeff Grubb also was hinting much the same thing. Jeff has also recently stated that Sony are entering kind of the second phase of the PS5, which makes sense when you think about it. General availability is much better at this stage. You know, it's not impossible to get hold of a PS5. Not to mention you're starting to get a lot more exclusives on the machine, and ultimately Sony are phasing out the PS4. It's still alive, of course, sort of, and you're getting some games which are still released on it, especially from developers such as Capcom, such as like Resident Evil 4, and it's a reasonably competent version. But going forward, there are many games, such as the new Final Fantasies, which is just not going to be on the PS4 for, you know, numerous reasons. So, fast forward to the information from Tom Henderson, which is being reported on is known as Q Lite, at least the code name. It connects directly to the PS5 utilizing remote play. Features adaptive triggers, it's got a large screen, touchscreen, 8 inches apparently, but it's always online and it's releasing before the PS5 Pro. Now the PS5 Pro, according to Tom, is going to launch before holidays 2024. I personally have been hearing that the PS5 Pro is dead. I also reported that regular viewers know over a year ago as well. I'd heard it was based on RDNA 3 Plus, Zen for 2 times performance in FP32, 2.5 times performance in ray tracing. However, with numerous factors like the cost of the system, TSMC's 5nm processor is not exactly cheap, plus obviously you would have to bolster numerous other elements of the console. I basically heard that it was most likely it was going to be dead, especially when you factor in extra work from the developers. I've also leaked Xbox Sabin, which is an APU codename. I don't know what the codename of the actual Xbox itself was. But basically it was kind of a Series S refresh. It was RDNA 3 Plus based with Zen 4, but perhaps most interestingly, it also featured a machine learning block, ML block, which was a custom design between AMD and Microsoft, and this was to facilitate upsampling without developer intervention. So basically, it would just automatically do it, a little bit like Auto HDR with Microsoft now. And it was really cool, but again, it was cancelled because of business case uses. But basically, it didn't meet the criteria needed. Developers weren't happy about another Xbox Series console to develop for, and ultimately it was scrapped, and Microsoft now are fully in on the next generation. I think Sony are probably doing the same thing, but I would love to be wrong. I would love there to be a PS5 Pro and my early info to be right, because quite frankly, I just want to talk about a PS5 Pro because I think it will be fun to talk about. So when I was told about this console originally, I was told that there had not been exactly hardware decided upon. The direction, at least when I was being told the information, seemed to indicate that Sony were heading towards a system which would be capable of playing its own exclusive games. But obviously, you know, at the end of the day, business plans can change, and it wouldn't be certainly inconceivable that that's not the direction Sony wanted to go in, especially given, well, there are a lot of challenges basically launching a system, which then obviously would need developer support, marketing, and all of that stuff. potentially Sony could be releasing the system to see what the scope of success is, or perhaps just the fact that, well, cloud gaming and all of that stuff is going to become a bigger thing in the future, so perhaps this is more just augmenting that. However, a big vision of the device, at least when I was hearing about it, is that it would work with the PSVR 2. Now, I honestly do not know whether the Q Lite will be able to do so. Logically, you may be able to, because again, it's just acting streaming, but I don't necessarily know what the purpose of that would be, given, again, the fact that, well, you kind of don't need that, given, you know, how the system's working. It's going to be interesting to see whether that's the case or not. Further to this, and I think I reported this in a previous video, a source actually had told me that, of course, multiple different vendors always reach out to these companies. So, you know, it's not unusual for even Nvidia, for example, to speak to Sony or whomever. Even though there's not much chance they're going to go with that vendor, of course these conversations always happen. And I'd heard that Qualcomm had reached out to Sony. This would actually make sense on a lower power device, which would basically be for streaming, not necessarily a device which is going to be used to play the latest and greatest games. I don't know, honestly, whether Qualcomm are powering the Q Lite. I'm going to be interested to see whether that's the case or not. Honestly, I was very skeptical that they would get the contract, but I'm going to be very interested if they did. Potentially, if Sony had gone with a, I don't know, independent device, let's say, they could have used one of AMD's APUs, the higher performance ones, which were based on like Zen 4 or Zen 5, RDNA 4 or 5 at that point, I'm sure. And they could have had a very powerful device at low power consumption, which potentially even possibly able to run PS4 or PS4 Pro games. And of course, again, their own, you know, exclusives. So I'm going to be very interested to see what the marketing around this is like. At the moment, you know, it's way too early to know just how this device is going to be marketed, what all of the use cases are. I would have liked... I'm actually surprised it's not more pushing towards cloud gaming. Instead, it seems to be basically PS5 remote play only. And given all of the patents from Sony on, well, cloud gaming, that's kind of interesting. My thoughts at the moment are a little muddled on this. I'm going to be doing more digging from my own sources. At the moment, I have to say that they're all keeping really tight-lipped. I've spoken to a few people and they immediately just said, yeah, no comment at the moment. So I'm going to keep digging to see what I can find out for you guys. But yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with this over the next couple of months, see if there's any more information. I'm a little disappointed if it is not its own independent device, because I think it would have been really cool. Obviously, the rumor is that the next generation Switch is going to launch at some point, you know. I don't at this point think it is a Switch. I think it's going to be its own console. I mentioned a couple of times, you know, when I first leaked about the Switch Pro, which then got confirmed by NVIDIA driver stuff, and then obviously that seems to have gotten scrapped, and Nintendo have gone back to the drawing board multiple times with the Switch, the Switch Pro and now this new version. I've heard that the new Nintendo console is roughly on par with Xbox Series S in GPU performance, but I think that's when you're including DLSS into the equation. And Nintendo are doing a lot actually at the moment. There are some recent Vulkan extensions, which obviously Nintendo are kind of, well, one of the APIs on the Switch is actually Vulkan. There's also like a proprietary NVIDIA API as well, which the Switch is using. I think it's got some customizations, but that's a little bit outside the scope of this video. I honestly am going to be very interested to see what Sony's direction is going forward. I think that we're only really just starting to enter the, how do I say, the cool phase of this generation. Like, I think with, you know, any console generation, it takes a couple of years, of course, for the hardware to really start to be utilized. And I think that both the Series X as well as the PS5 are really still kind of finding their feet. I would have loved for a standalone device, honestly. But yeah, it just kind of is what it is. I would have loved for Sony to have focused on a standalone device, but it is what it is. It's going to be very interesting to see what the marketing, as I said, is going to be like for this console. With that said, take care of yourselves. Have an amazing day. Bye for now.